What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be looking at the running back position, seeing who I'd sell high on, buy low on, as well as a quick backfield update where I've seen the value change this weekend. So we'll go over that in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual. Stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was among the top 10 wide receivers in half PPR scoring right now. Only one has fewer than 16 receptions. Who was it? The answer is Jamar Chase, who's actually the wide receiver 5 right now in half PPR scoring. Only 11 receptions. Official Rich One was first to get that right on YouTube, and at Jackson Gamely was the first to get that right on Twitter. Today's stat. The top 5 players in percent of team air yards right now are Brandon Cooks, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, Devonta Adams, and who is 5th? All right, let's talk about some running backs. So Tyson Williams obviously remains a sell. It's not sell high anymore. He only had 5 touches last week. I doubt you can get as much for him right now, but I continue to believe he has not that much value. He's being way overvalued by the community right now. Try and sell him if you can. I'd also be selling Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mentioned him in yesterday's video as a potential for today. He was one of the players that dropped a lot in the rest of the season rankings. 109 yards, 109 total yards. I believe it was 100 rushing and 9 receiving on 2 receptions. 19 total touches, which means he must have had 17 carries. Has a touchdown. That's all great. But he fumbled that cost him the game 2 weeks ago. He fumbles again this last week. They're clearly using Darrell Williams as like the goal line back. So yes, he has that receiving touchdown close. But in general, like most of the time when they're getting close, Clyde comes off the field for Darrell Williams, which is obviously a bad thing. He also only has 5 receptions on the year. And that's not because Kansas City is just dominating every week. Right? And it's like, oh, he's just in such positive game scripts. They're just running it a ton. They don't need to throw to him. They're 1-2. They've lost 2 out of 3 games. That is not the case. Even when they get into desperation mode, even when they're trying to throw a lot, they're not using him in the receiving game. 5 receptions through 3 weeks. That is not good. He's still going to have value in the trade market since he was a first-round pick. You know, he was a high pick in fantasy as well. He's still the lead back on the Chiefs. But I have the exact same concerns that I had last week. You know, I still have him as a low-end running back too, even after the big game. So I would use this as an opportunity to perhaps sell high on him, try and upgrade another spot. So maybe do a 2-for-1, him plus another running back for a stud, him plus a wide receiver for an upgrade at wide receiver or running back. That's the trades I would do for Clyde. Damien Harris again makes the list. He was a sell high last week. Now he's just a sell. It wasn't even a high this week. It's just get him off your rosters. I want you to just like not dump him, because we never want to be sending a deal where we're not getting anything in return. Then there's no point. Just keep him on your bench if that's the case. But I think someone in your league is willing to offer something for him, especially because of this James White injury. Everyone knows James White's going to miss some time. Everyone's going to think that's a big positive for Harris, but it's not. I mean, he's been extremely inefficient this season. He has absolutely no role in the receiving game, and that's even in a game where White got hurt and Stevenson was inactive. So if there was ever a time, and they lost, so it's a negative game script. James White goes down. Stevenson is inactive. If there's ever a game where Damien Harris is going to get receptions, it was last week, and yet they still preferred to use Brandon Bolden in the receiving game instead of Harris. Bolden is only on the roster because he's great on special teams. That is it. They don't ever want to actually rely on Brandon Bolden as a running back, and yet they did so in the receiving game this week ahead of Harris. That fact alone should give us like a significant insight into how they view Harris in the receiving game. And the fact that now with White out, Taylor's probably going to be active, Stevenson's probably going to be active, or at least one of them's going to be active every week. They're going to take carries, they're going to take targets away from Harris. And so no, the James White injury does not increase his value. If anything, it decreased it because we saw the upside and it's not there. There is now just no scenario unless JJ Taylor and Stevenson both get hurt. That is probably the only outcome where Harris breaks out this season and is someone we can rely on. And so hopefully you traded him last week when we said to sell high, but I'm saying it again. I really feel like I should be dropping him into 30s. He's running back 29 right now in rest of season rankings. That still doesn't feel good. I'm hoping that this injury just gives an opportunity to Stevenson, because Harris has just looked so bad that hopefully Stevenson can get some run and can carve out a nice role for himself in the offense. One last name I'll mention as far as sell highs is Alexander Mattison. Obviously, everyone knows that this is Dalvin Cook's backfield, right? So you're not going to trick anyone into thinking that Mattison took over, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. But if you happen to draft him or add him off waivers and you don't have Dalvin Cook, then I would just see what the Dalvin Cook owner wants for him. Obviously, they now know, if they didn't before, that having both of them secures running back one, right? Every week that Cook is out, Madison's a stud, but then you can't play Mattison while Cook is healthy. So he's going to have differing level of values depending on if you have Dalvin Cook or you don't. And so if the Dalvin Cook owner is now struggling at running back because Cook is out, just send an offer or just ask them, send them in the league chat, text them if you know them. What do they want for Mattison? Because they might be willing to spend a lot, and maybe you can either flip a waiver pick if you got him off waivers for a really nice wide receiver, really nice running back, or I'm not saying he's going to command a running back one, but if you're a little thin at wide receiver, maybe you were one of my teams that I talked about last week that had Brown go on COVID IR and then Deontay Johnson get hurt. So I'm just praying that Ayuk can be fine in my second flex. If you're in that type of situation like I'm in, and I had Mattison and the person is willing to offer me just a quality flex wide receiver for Mattison, I might be willing to take that because I'm significantly upgrading my rest of season value, because I know this is just an ankle injury for Cook. Unless he suffers another injury, Cook's going to come back, and now Mattison isn't worth as much until Cook gets hurt again, but you don't know if that's going to happen. So if you can flip him for a more stable piece on your roster, it's going to consistently help you every week, then I think it's worth doing. And again, it's just worth seeing. Talk to the manager, see what they're asking for Mattison. Before we do buy lows, I mentioned I want to do this intermediary topic, just going over a backfield update. It's not necessarily a sell high. It's not really a buy low. It's just here's some information. Do with it what you will. But I wanted to update you guys on the Buffalo backfield. Again, not sure if either one's really a buy low or sell high. Maybe it just depends on your roster, the other person's roster. But the outlook has shifted, and I want to give an update on it. So we opened the season. It's first reported that Zach Moss is a healthy scratch in week one. Later reports come out that it was health concerns, likely stemming from his hamstring injury in camp. Then in week two, we see Moss play, but he only gets 28% of the snaps. It was mostly in garbage time. He scores 2 touchdowns, both in the fourth quarter of a 35-0 win. It was garbage time production. Singletary was still the guy. Things changed, though, in week 3. So Moss goes up to 56% of the snaps. He ran the same number of routes as Singletary, and he did not get there because of the blowout. He was used early. His touchdown came in the second quarter. And as per Ben Gretsch, Moss now has more green zone touches, so touches inside the 10-yard line, in 2 games than Singletary has in 3. And that's very notable. One of the factors I was talking about with Singletary early in the season was, if Moss is just out of this backfield and isn't going to be used, all of his high-value touches from last season shift to Singletary. Singletary is very valuable. But we now know that's not going to happen. They're shifting back to what they did last season, which was maybe Singletary's kind of the guy between the 20s. They're definitely going to rotate in and out, but it was Singletary with a slight lead there. But when they get really close to the end zone, it's Zach Moss taking over. Moss getting the targets and the carries there, and those are so valuable in fantasy that it tanks the value of Singletary. The fact that they're splitting, even on a good offense, hurts both of their upside, because you can only be so consistent if you're getting half of a workload in an offense. And so right now I have them back-to-back in the rest of season rankings, running back 36 and 37. I might move them both up a hair because technically they do both come with the upside that the other one gets hurt and they're instantly, I would say, a weekly running back 2. As for right now, this is again the do with this what you will. As of right now, they're more of a matchup-based second flex play. I wouldn't feel great about them as like, if you have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, I'm not feeling great about starting either one of them in that flex spot. But as you work in the leagues with 2 flex spots, if you want RB0 and you've got that second running back spot, you need to put one of them in, I think that's fine. But I wanted to update you guys and just say like the value of Zach Moss has increased because he clearly was just coming back from that injury. They're going to give him more of these high value touches, and that's obviously important for fantasy. So Moss has more upside. I believe he's the one I have 1 spot ahead, but they both have the same rest of season value because they're going to be very, very close in opportunity. On to buy lows. Last week we had Saquon, Kamara, James Robinson, Myles Gaskin, and Michael Carter. You can no longer really buy low on Saquon, Kamara, and Robinson since they had big games, but Gaskin and Carter are still really good options. Again, like I talked about last week, we're not going overboard on either of these guys. Neither of them is going to be a running back 1 unless just like crazy luck happens. Like these are not guys we're expecting to just bust out and be dominant this season. But I have Gaskin as running back 23 rest of the season. Carter is a running back 30. I think both of their values are going to rise from where they are right now. And I think both are going to be relatively cheap, which is good because it's really difficult to trade for running backs, right? Like I'm sure you guys know, like people don't want to part with their running backs unless you're giving them a running back in return. Like no one has like 5 insanely good running backs, right? So upgrading at that spot and acquiring depth at that spot is difficult. And I think these are 2 names that aren't going to cost you all that much. And that maybe you could even use wide receivers for, since most of us built really deep wide receiver teams, maybe you can use some of that depth at wide receiver to try and acquire these 2 because I think their value right now is low. People have asked for an update on Carter. It's really just because he's so clearly the best running back in New York, and they've just been destroyed in their first 3 games against 3 really good defenses. They've played, obviously, Carolina, who was like, they're probably like the most underrated defense right now. They're a very, very quality defense. They play the Patriots, a really good defense, and a good defense that can really confuse rookie quarterbacks. And then they play in Denver. Like those are brutal matchups, so it's not shocking that Wilson has looked absolute trash. Like obviously we hoped he'd look better, but Wilson's gonna get better throughout the season. This offense is gonna get better, and it's just so clear that they're giving more touches to Michael Carter. They want Carter to be the guy, and so if any part of this offense improves even just a little bit, Carter's gonna go up in value, and it's very difficult to find starting running backs for cheap. And this is a starting running back that is not expensive at all to acquire. For new names, though, this week, we'll start off with Jonathan Taylor. He somehow has not scored a touchdown this season, despite leading the league with 6 carries inside the 5-yard line. No other running back has more than 2 carries inside the 5-yard line and has yet to score. And he's one of only 2 players who even has more than 3 total carries inside the 5. And again, he has 6. And if you're wondering about, well, not inside the 5, what about red zone carries? I mean, inside the 5 is the most important. But even looking at red zone carries, he's tied with Derrick Henry, tied with Aaron Jones for first with 13 red zone carries. So he has a massive role in the red zone. And we know that the Colts are now shopping Marlon Mack. So the early down workload is all in on Jonathan Taylor. He's getting fantastic volume. The expected fantasy points are high. He just hasn't hit yet. And this is sort of like Saquon last week. I mean, try trading for Saquon right now. It's a lot more difficult than it was after week 1, after week 2. Probably going to happen with Jonathan Taylor. Once he explodes, you're not going to be able to acquire Jonathan Taylor because people are going to look at the roster and be like, oh, he's getting an insane number of carries. He still gets some targets. He's getting all of the volume when they get close. So the touchdown upside, he could lead the league in touchdowns even having not scored yet. Like probably a little unrealistic because I would say Aaron Jones has a good lead on him. But would it shock me if he came within 1 or 2 touchdowns of the lead league? No, absolutely not. So he's a phenomenal, underpriced running back right now. I did mention him in the running back video yesterday. Maybe some of you are confused. You're like, didn't you say he's moving down your season rankings? Yeah, but he moved down from the running back 7 to running back 10. I still think he's a quality running back 1. And having not scored yet, having not gone off yet, there's definitely a possibility the person in your league values him more as a 2. Capitalize on that. Next up, we've got David Montgomery. Always smart to trade for players when their team has like 47 total yards, like net yards. Montgomery ran around on 73% of dropbacks. He has been in on at least 80% of the snaps in back-to-back weeks. He's averaging 15 carries, 3 targets a game, all really nice volume and opportunity. But he has back-to-back games of 9.4 and 6.5 fantasy points, including that just embarrassing loss to the Browns this last week. Like, it is pretty clear at this point that Matt Nagy is a bottom 5 coach in the NFL. He's not Adam Gase levels bad, but he's not that far off from just having no idea how to appropriately use the talent on his roster. He set them up to fail instead of setting them up to win last week. Now, it was still a difficult task going into Cleveland and winning that game, but he set them up to fail. They had no chance given the game plan that they went out there for, and that sort of coaching obviously has a negative impact on every single player on the roster. But with that being said, the Browns are still one of the best defenses in the NFL. Montgomery still has one of the highest volume shares for running backs. He's a very talented running back. He's proven that he can be have a high fantasy ceiling in the past. Of course, we saw that stretch last season. He was just going off. And realistically, there's nowhere to go but up. Again, they had 47 net yards in that game for their entire offense. And Dave Montgomery had 55 total yards. So think about that for a second. They had negative net yards when the ball wasn't going to David Montgomery. Brighter days are ahead for the Bears. Brighter days are ahead for Montgomery. Maybe that starts this next week against the Lions. Soft defense, up-tempo game. They're going to still have to score. The defense isn't going to be good again, so they should be able to score. So definitely a buy low. And again, that's just good advice. Like, if any team goes out there and has less than 50 total yards, pretty much everyone on that offense has to be a buy low because no one's feeling good about their Bears players after that performance. But Montgomery's still very, very valuable in fantasy. Next up, we have Miles Sanders. He somehow had only 2 carries for 27 yards on Monday night. But we can chalk that up to bad game script. It wasn't because someone else took over. Like, if you watch that game, the Eagles couldn't. I mean, they just could not run the ball. It wasn't that they couldn't run it successfully. It was like, if the Eagles were going to start running the ball, like, they're going to get smoked, right? They had to at least try and throw it. Also, the Dallas defense, it's a lot better than we thought it would be. So add them with, like, the Panthers and the Bengals. I'd say Panthers, Bengals, and Cowboys are all better than pretty much anyone thought they were going to be this season. Sanders still had a pretty high snap share when the game was competitive. Obviously, a lot of snaps late. Boston Scott comes in. Gainwell comes in. But, like, if this game was competitive, Sanders probably jumps like 10 to 15% in total snap share. And he's looked really good this season. This isn't me saying trade for someone who's, like, looked bad in a bad team. Like, for number one, like, the Eagles looked really good in week 1. Of course, it was against the Falcons, but it looked really good. And every single week when they give the ball to Miles Sanders, he looks good. And he clearly looks like the best running back on the roster. And so I know they've had 2 bad weeks, but it's 2 bad weeks, right? Let's not overreact after an explosion in week 1 to 2 down weeks. I still think this is a good offense. And also look at the production. I mean, even with a 2-carry game and 0 touchdowns, like, where would you think Miles Sanders would be ranked in half PPR scoring after that? Again, 3 games in. One of those games he has 2 carries. None of those games he scores a touchdown. He's running back 27 right now. So give him 1 touchdown, he's inside the top 20. Like, I'm not concerned. Again, I think this offense is going to be good. The touches are going to go up when they're not getting smoked by Dallas. And the production is going to be there when it goes up because he's been really, really good this season. I think he's pretty firmly in that running back like 17 to 20 range. So I like him as like a mid to low end running back too. And I have to imagine that, like, there are leagues out there where his manager is like very, very concerned with a 2-carry performance. So I would capitalize on that if that's the case. Lastly, I'll throw in Elijah Mitchell. Sermon looked really, really bad on Sunday night. And Mitchell doesn't have like a major injury or expecting him to return pretty quickly. I don't think that Mitchell is like a super valuable running back or anything because, like, I still think it's going to be a committee over there. But I would just see what your league mates are asking for him. I value him in that like running back 30 range, maybe like in the low 30s, but he has upside from there. Like, next week, maybe we're talking about him as a riser. Like if he's active, I think he'll be the starter. If he's active, I think he can have a good week. And so I could easily see him over these next couple of weeks jumping into like the mid-20s if he plays well. Whereas some other running backs in that range, I don't really see their role increasing all that much. I just think there's some upside there because of how bad Sermon looked. Again, I don't think his value like cratered, so I don't think he's like free right now. But it's definitely possible that someone spent like a lot of their fab on him. They saw him go out and do not that great in the first week they had him. Then he's out in the second week, and they're like, "Oh man, I just wasted this pick. I just wasted all this fab." Maybe they're willing to sell a little bit low on him. And it's the exact same thing that I like had just gone over with Michael Carter. Just see what it costs to get you Elijah Mitchell, to get you Michael Carter. It's probably not going to be all that much, and I think their value is going to increase. So why not just see what it takes to get them? So that'll do it for the week 4 running back trade targets video. I will be posting more names on the website. They should already be up when you're watching this video across not only running back, but other positions as well. So if you want to see a larger list, check that out. Then you can always look at just like the rest of season rankings. You know, if I have someone ranked 20th rest of season and you're receiving an offer that is comparing them to like the 30th best running back and you're the 20th best, well, that's probably my answer in a trade, right? I want the 20th best running back rest of the season, not the 30th best. So you can kind of use that as like a trade chart as well. And again, all that information is available on our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.